According to the records, multiple Fox News hosts knew the president needed to act immediately. They texted Mr. Meadows, and he has turned over those texts. Quote, Mark, the president needs to tell people in the Capitol to go home. This is hurting all of us. He is destroying his legacy, Laura Ingraham wrote. Please get him on TV, destroying everything you have accomplished, Brian Kilmeade texted. Quote, can he make a statement? Ask people to leave the Capitol, Sean Hannity urged. As the violence continued, one of the president's sons texted Mr. Meadows, quote, he's got to condemn this shit ASAP. The Capitol Police tweet is not enough, Donald Trump Jr. texted. Meadows responded, quote, I'm pushing it hard, I agree. Still, President Trump did not immediately act. Donald Trump Jr. texted again and again, urging action by the president. Quote, we need an Oval Office address. He has to lead now. It has gone too far and gotten out of hand, end quote. But hours passed without necessary action by the president. Mr. Meadows received numerous text messages, which he has produced without any privilege claim, imploring that Mr. Trump take the specific action we all knew his duty required. These text messages leave no doubt the White House knew exactly what was happening here at the Capitol. Members of Congress, the press, and others wrote to Mark Meadows as the attack was underway. One text Mr. Meadows received said, quote, we are under siege here at the Capitol. Another, quote, they have breached the Capitol. In a third, Mark, protesters are literally storming the Capitol, breaking windows on doors, rushing in. Is Trump going to say something? A fourth, there's an armed standoff at the House chamber door. And another from someone inside the Capitol. We are all helpless. Dozens of texts, including from Trump administration officials, urged immediate action by the president. Quote, POTUS has to come out firmly and tell the protesters to dissipate. Someone is going to get killed. In another, Mark, he needs to stop this now. A third, in all caps, tell them to go home. A fourth, and I quote, POTUS needs to calm this shit down.
In other words, they knew. All those Fox hosts who pretended that the Capitol was being stormed by Antifa, they knew. All those members of Congress that pretended it was just a tourist visit, they knew. All those Republicans who tried to claim that the insurrection was justified, they knew. They will lie to their supporters while their very own text messages, sent while they're not performing for their marks, betray the fact that they knew better. Now, if you're wondering why former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows was so reluctant to hand over any information to the January 6th committee, it's because this is what he's been hiding. Texts from Fox News' Laura Ingraham and Brian Kilmeade and Sean Hannity, from Republican lawmakers, even from Trump's own son, Donald Trump Jr., who apparently doesn't have a direct line of communication to his own father. But also, I feel like we already kinda knew that. But what this shows, first and foremost, is that while Trump's allies have fallen over themselves to conjure up every excuse in the book to pretend that the insurrection somehow wasn't an insurrection, privately, candidly, they were well aware that this was an attack on our democracy. An attack so serious that multiple people conceded that this would destroy Trump's legacy. That is a heavy charge to drop if you don't mean it, especially considering that these are people who would walk over hot coals for him. So for these people, these sycophants, to acknowledge not just that he screwed up, but that he destroyed his legacy, conveys that they knew full well the gravity of what was happening that day. But what's worse, leagues worse, is what they said publicly. Because while Laura Ingraham was texting Mark Meadows, this is hurting all of us, he is destroying his legacy, here's what she was saying on air.
Today, the Capitol was under siege by people who can only be described as antithetical to the MAGA movement. Now, there were likely not all Trump supporters, and there are some reports that Antifa sympathizers may have been sprinkled throughout the crowd. We'll have more on that later.
So we knew this would happen when you had a huge group of people descending on Capitol Hill, when you have members of the Trump, support organizations, and then Antifa threatening to show up at the same time. We'll learn more about to the extent that that happened.
The Washington Times is reporting that at least 2 Antifa were spotted in the crowd.
While Sean Hannity was texting Mark Meadows, can he make a statement? Knowing full well that these were Trump supporters who would listen to him if he made a statement, here's what he was saying on air.
Everyone knew going in today that this crowd was going to be massive. They knew there were hundreds of thousands of people that came to town. We also knew that there's always bad actors that will infiltrate large crowds.
Meaning they made the conscious decision to spread disinformation. Again, they knew that these were Trump supporters. The fact that they were so intent on Trump speaking to these people, knowing that they would listen to him and only him, is a tacit admission of exactly that. And yet they chose to go on national television one by one and lie, because their goal was to absolve the guy who caused this of any and all guilt. They knew the truth and chose to lie. And by the way, if you want proof that both sides aren't the same, the quote-unquote left just banished Chris Cuomo for breaking journalistic ethics by helping his brother, then governor of New York, survive a PR crisis. The right acts as a crisis comms team for a president during an insurrection on the US Capitol, and yet still they're the darlings of conservative media to this day. But sure, both sides are definitely the same. Imagine for a moment if Rachel Maddow or Anderson Cooper or Don Lemon or Jim Acosta texted Obama's chief of staff to tell him to make a speech at a certain time because they thought that it would be better for him politically. Imagine what right-wing media, what Fox News itself would say. Do you think they'd ever let those anchors forget it? Do you think that the news cycle slamming the corrupt, complicit, unethical reporters on the left would ever end? Yeah, me neither. And yet, funny enough, these Fox hosts haven't even acknowledged their own texts. Forget about spinning it. They're just going to pretend that it never happened. Why? Because they know right-wing media is a closed feedback loop. And so they're banking on their supporters simply never finding out. They don't feel an ounce of obligation to tell the truth, because the point isn't actually reporting news, it's serving a steady diet of carefully curated propaganda. Honestly, the January 6th committee should haul all of these people in so that they can admit, under oath, that they sent these texts. And then they can explain to the committee why they were so confident that Antifa was behind the January 6th insurrection. Confident enough to report it on air to millions of people if they were privately insisting that only Trump had the power to call it off. If it was really Antifa that they were claiming to their viewers, why would they need Donald Trump to make a statement? Why would Antifa listen to Trump? They wouldn't. And Laura Ingraham and Sean Hannity and Brian Kilmeade know that, but the disinformation is the point. I'll end with this. Congress, attorneys general, and the DOJ need to be able to see what we are up against. This is a coordinated disinformation machine, a collection of people so shameless, so ruthless, so deceptive that they will do whatever it takes to achieve their goals. If we do not take action against these people, we are giving them tacit permission to do it again. And next time, they won't fail. They've had time to hone their message and manipulate their supporters through a relentless barrage of lies. It's time for those in charge to wake the hell up and start treating this ongoing assault on our democracy for exactly what it is, and to finally take action while we still have the chance. To see more videos like this, click the subscribe button right here on this screen. And if you want to support my work, subscribe to my podcast, No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen. I cover the most important stories each week, and my guest is always one of the top political figures, including Vice President Kamala Harris, Jen Psaki, Elizabeth Warren, Pete Buttigieg, Nancy Pelosi, Katie Porter, Cory Booker, and so many more. The podcast link is also right here on this screen, so give it a listen and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.